Welcome to Speechless. We're glad to have you here. We're live from SPNN in St. Paul, Minnesota, just about 3 blocks from where approximately 260 babies were ripped apart from their mother's wombs this last week. And want you to know some of these countries that are more advanced and more civilized than ours, like Kenya, has just recently ordered an abortion group to immediately cease all abortions. And the reason was they weren't following the law. They were giving abortions without parental consent and also long-term birth control without parental consent. They were advising the patients the proper way, and so they shut them down. Now, that's what a civilized country would do when organizations violate the law. Not here in America. The Planned Parenthood violates the law all the time and has been caught, and not only double billing, Medicaid fraud, and all that kind of stuff. And America says, well, a civilized society says if you violate the law and you have our agenda, we'll let it go. So, hey, Kenya looks like it's going to be better off than the United States. Last week, Ron, forgot his last name. Bransner was on the show. We were talking about Agenda 21. And wouldn't you know it, Minneapolis is trying to implement the Agenda 21 policy, and part of that is high-density housing and a lot of people in a small amount of space. But also part of Agenda 21 is being eco-friendly, as they would call it. So Minneapolis, in their implementation of the 2040 plan, which is Agenda 21, called for all this high-density housing. Well, the environmental groups, which were also part of Agenda 21, were saying, hey, you're not considering all the bike trails and the parks and the things you need to put in with this high-density housing. So they're suing Minneapolis. So we got a situation where Agenda 21 is fighting Agenda 21, and that's what you're just going to get with these government-controlled type organizations that are out there, where they're trying to manipulate the culture. And it is a manipulation of culture with the high-density housing and then not allowing development in the rural areas outside the state. So forced housing, just an update. It was just amazing to see it in the news just after we talked about it, raising its head. Of course, it's there all the time. Agenda 21 is being promoted in the cities, and immigration, which we're going to talk about again tonight. There it is, raising its head, just showing what it's about and basically the trauma it's going to inflict on our state, in the state of Minnesota. Well, tonight we're going to get into one aspect of Agenda 21, which is the refugee situation, the immigration that is being put on the Minnesota from the United Nations. And I have again with me my good friend and guest, Bob Carrillo. And you've been doing some more research, and we got updates on a lot of different things that have been happening in Minnesota.
Yeah, we do.
A lot.
And you wait 15 more minutes, and there's going to be a ton more.
Well, yeah. And boy, it's too bad the show isn't a daily show, because there's just a lot of information to cover, and so
every day
we could always have updates, and sometimes we just got to come back to it, and instead of going on to a new topic, refresh of what's happening here.
Well, for those of us that have been in Minnesota for a long period of time and volunteer Minnesotans like myself and you from out of state, and I've been here 47 years, probably 15 years too long, I think, sometimes. But we have a different perspective because...
Isn't that about as long as I've known you?
I think, no, it's 18 years, I think. 18,
okay,
19 years.
I just checking that
Oh, yeah.
you weren't referring to me.
But Yeah, I think for those of us that have moved here from other places, and I was born and raised in the military, and most of my stateside time as a kid was spent back in New York and New Jersey, but we see things differently because we come from a different place. So I think we see Minnesota and what the changes that have occurred in Minnesota, especially in the last 10 years, very clearly, and not, it's all unbelievable, and not in a good way.
Right.
I mean, when you have groups like or publications like The Stream asking the question, is the Mall of America now a Sharia place or space? Excuse me.
You mean the Mall of Sharia?
Yeah,
Not the Mall of
the
America.
Mall of America now a Sharia space.
So I would title the Mall of Sharia.
Pretty much. And if you asked some of the people who have experienced up close and personal what goes on in the mall in terms of the behavior on the part of mall security, they might agree with you. And one person in particular, this past August, well, let me begin by saying this is Pastor Ramin Parsa from California, Reseda, California. Iranian-born, a former Muslim, now Christian pastor. On the 31st of July this year, by way of the Aeromexico plane crash, he was an international hero. He was actually featured on Channel 11 here locally as a hero, having saved, according to all the passengers, having saved all the passengers and crew on that crashed plane. And if you see the crash of the plane, you're wondering how anybody could possibly walk away from it.
He filmed what was going on in there.
Absolutely.
And he was praying to Jesus to save everybody.
And he also physically helped to rip off the door of the plane once it did hit the ground to save all those passengers. I mean, you take a look at this. You take a look at this crash site. You can't quite see it, but this is amazing that anybody could possibly survive this crash. So on July 31st, Aeromexico plane crash, this good man, and author, by the way, his book is entitled From Ashes to Glory. This is an internationally recognized scholar. And again, a good man. So on July 31st this year, he's a hero, and he has to come to the Mall of America.
And his book is not about the plane crash.
No, not at all.
It's about his life.
It's about his life.
Before the plane crash. I mean, that's not part of it.
His conversion to Christianity.
From what?
He was a Muslim.
Okay.
Born and raised in Iran. So I guess my point is that here's a good man. He comes to Minnesota. He conducts a presentation at a local church. The local pastor, it's a Hispanic church, Christian church. After the presentation, they decide to go to the Mall of America for a stroll in their shorts and sandals, and with a 14-year-old son of the local pastor. At which point, two Somali women, young women, engage him, and again, he's a pretty good-looking guy. So they engage him because they can hear his accent, and they want to know more about him. They asked him if he was Muslim, and he said, I used to be, but not any longer. I'm a Christian pastor.
Which would automatically, well, why are they asking that question? I mean, wouldn't that be considered by mall standards proselytizing? Why aren't they in trouble?
Well,
I mean, we haven't heard the
one
rest
might
of the
ask,
story,
but the point is that they were engaging in a nice, pleasant conversation until a third woman came over and raised all kinds of Cain with the two Somali women to begin with, and also the pastor telling them to knock it off. And they were actually defending him, the two Somali women. They were defending Pastor Parsa.
Okay.
Well, then the irate Somali woman goes and gets mall security. They come over, one gentleman comes over and gets in Pastor Parsa's face, and the other pastor as well, accuse him of soliciting, proselytizing, and tell him he can't do that here. You can't talk about Christianity here. So they disengage, to make a long story short, and I'm sure the eye in the sky cameras will prove that. They disengaged, the two pastors and the son. They went into Starbucks to get coffee, something to drink. They were in there for about 20 minutes to half an hour. Meanwhile, the one mall officer calls two more, and they wait for him to come out, at which point they tell him he has to leave, and he's going to be arrested, or he's going to be arrested. He said, for what? So they handcuff him and take him into mall prison in the bowels of the Mall of America. And they chain him or handcuff him to a steel chair, which is bolted to a floor. For 2 hours and 15 minutes to a half an hour, they refused to call Bloomington PD. They refused to give him water, a bathroom break, and basically they engage in some form of weird interrogation, and they try to barter water for a photograph of the guy. Roughly 2.5 hours.
Wow.
This thing started at 7:30 in the evening, this whole incident. It ended at 1:30 in the morning when, and the pastor and his 14-year-old son, they were escorted out as soon as Pastor Parsa was arrested and taken away. They had no idea where he was going to go or being taken. They are escorted to the 14-year-old and the pastor, the local pastor, are escorted to their vehicle at the mall ramp and told to get off the property. They were on a 24-hour ban for doing nothing. They've done nothing.
But in the meantime, their friend is in this jail,
mall prison,
being locked up, detained.
Right.
And
no rights. They won't provide an attorney.
They can't go and wait for him there?
No.
There should have been a place for them to be able to wait for him.
One would think. But again, he was detained, in my view, unlawfully in their interrogation room for 2 hours and 15 to 20 minutes to half an hour before the Bloomington Police Department was ever called in the first place. Started at 7:30 in the evening, ended at 1:30 in the morning, when they finally allowed him to make a phone call to ask the other pastor to come and pick him up. This is supposed to be America. This is supposed to be the United States. Now, this is a gentleman, young man, who has, again, born and raised in Iran. He's been tortured in Iran. He was tortured in Turkey for being a Christian pastor. So if he did not suffer immediately from PTSD, I can't imagine any other feeling in his soul, in his gut, when he is chained to a steel chair and denied all of his rights that he asked for. He asked for an attorney.
He asked for an attorney.
He asked,
didn't get one.
Nope. He asked
they got to give him water.
They asked him to call the Bloomington Police Department. They wouldn't do that either. They basically browbeat this man for 2 hours and 15 minutes to 2 hours and a half until they finally called Bloomington PD. And Bloomington PD then charges him without even asking him a question. They just take the mall security officer's word for this thing, and so to ask this question, I think, is fair. Is the Mall of America now a Sharia space where you are not allowed to be a Christian there? You are only allowed to speak of religion if you are an Islamist, if you are a Muslim. The place has been overrun in that way for quite a number of years now. So we have an international author who comes to Minnesota to become a criminal? Are you serious?
For talking?
For talking. Not proselytizing, not pushing Christianity.
I was looking at the charge on the citation sheet, and it's a misdemeanor charge. It's a crime.
$78 bail after all of that. Can you believe that?
Well, and under what he's being charged under as of now, of course, they can change the charges and make new ones or other ones. But
next week is his.
So next Monday at 1:30.
Next Tuesday at 1:30.
Next Tuesday at 1:30.
That's right.
Yeah, at Southdale.
It's Southdale at the Hennepin County Court.
Okay.
There's the hearing, the next hearing.
The
Pretrial hearing.
Okay.
And during the last hearing,
The arraignment.
the arraignment, the prosecuting attorney for Bloomington, can you imagine the taxpayer dollar waste here? He wants to know if there are witnesses. Well, there are witnesses. There's the local pastor and his 14-year-old son, and I'm sure that the eye in the sky cameras.
Who wanted to know where there's witnesses?
The prosecuting attorney for Bloomington. Yeah.
What kind of question is that?
I think it's a fair question.
Shouldn't he know?
One would think.
I mean, he should know who his witnesses are.
Absolutely, but I guess he was looking for witnesses to support the attorney representing Pastor Parsa at this point. Well,
Okay.
he should have known that in the first place anyway, because the mall cops actually escorted the 14-year-old son and the local pastor out of the building and told them they were gone. They were banned
Well,
for 24 hours.
Maybe I'm a little more cynical, which I doubt, but it sounds to me like he was trying to find out, the prosecuting attorney was trying to find out what he could get away with.
Perhaps.
Oh,
But-
we don't have any witnesses. Oh, okay.
Well, but they do have witnesses.
You know.
And they also have the cameras that
Right.
are everywhere in the mall that they could subpoena if they needed to, or request if they needed to do that, which I'm sure they have done. It's not audio, but it's video.
Right.
To support the fact that they disengaged and they disengaged from the two Somali women, and they went into Starbucks and
So when
and
the
were there
officer
quite a while.
said, please stop talking, they stopped.
They stopped. He left.
You know.
So
I mean, obviously a person's going to go, why are you doing this? What's going on?
That's exactly
so
what he
you're
did.
going to ask questions.
I interviewed him.
So you don't do anything wrong.
so that you can figure out exactly what their argument is and
And
stop
what you're
doing
doing.
whatever that is
Right.
that they have deemed to be inappropriate or improper. Okay, well, they found out and they left. They disengaged, walked away from the
Yeah.
two women that actually engaged them in the first place. So there's a double standard here relative to behavior all over the place. You've got, we had this incident just recently at the McDonald's in Eden Prairie.
Well, before we get to that,
Sure, you bet.
I want to get to what he was charged with. Trespasses on the premises of another. So how do you trespass on the Mall of America when you're invited in?
I don't know. It's private property. I suppose.
Well, it's
they
private property, but they're inviting you in. Come
Well, they
shop
are.
here.
Absolutely.
So he did that, and it's a tourist place,
And he was sightseeing.
and he was sightseeing. Did buy some coffee or hot chocolate there. Okay. Trespasses on the premises of another, and so you got to do both of these things. So there was no trespass to begin with,
Of course not.
and without claim of right, refuses to depart the premises on demand of the lawful possessor.
Which isn't true. All he did was ask the question, which is reasonable, why do I have to leave? I didn't do anything. Okay, well, you're under arrest. That's it. No
Wow.
answer, just you are under arrest. The double standards relative to the disparate treatment of people like Pastor Parsa or you or me versus other people who seem to get a pass at every turn for any kind of an offense, whether it is the 100-person riot at Valley Fair. 3 people got arrested. 100 people jumped the fences and busted through the turnstiles to create bedlam there. 100 people.
Yeah.
And it took 6 police departments, state troopers, a police helicopter to evacuate 15,000 people because of that riot and the brawl that was created inside that park. That's just this fall. My daughter and son-in-law and my grandkids were caught
there.
up in this bedlam. Caught up.
And they say it was
Is this a hate crime?
Somali.
That's right.
Right.
100 Somali so-called youths. Is this a hate crime? I don't know. We have in Minneapolis.
Well, at least
in
it's a
Minneapolis,
hate crime against Valley Scare.
one would think. And what's really ironic, it was staged.
What?
It was staged.
What does that mean?
In other words, it was done on Law Enforcement Appreciation Day. Law Enforcement and First Responder Appreciation Day is when this riot, in my opinion, was staged. I think that they were being probed. I said that to the police captain with Shakopee PD. I believe that they were being probed. Last year they had another event similar to this with Valley Fair on a much smaller scale. 2 weeks after this riot, that nobody seems to look at and say, this is a hate crime, they had another incident at Valley Fair. It connected to a ride where a woman was actually interviewed. She was with her child. She was interviewed on Channel 5 News about this. Another small brawl broke out. It took the security people about an hour to even respond to that one. It got so nasty that she took her child and left and abandoned the $175 ride and,
Wow.
and left the place. So one thing is a hate crime. This is Minneapolis, by the way. This is a hate crime hotline.
Right.
Right. So apparently Pastor Parsa is guilty of some nebulous hate crime, but the Valley Fair 100-person riot, that's not a hate crime?
So you're talking about a double standard here.
Oh, it's unbelievable. Then we have the most recent event, and that was the gentleman. There were 9 people at the McDonald's.
At the McDonald's,
right? In Eden Prairie.
A group of people.
9 Somali so-called youths, and one guy, 55-year-old fella, who is now being accused of brandishing a weapon. I've seen the video. I see no weapon that he's brandishing. And while they're engaging him, he's backing away from.
That's on the video.
It's on the video, and he backs out of the McDonald's. And yes, he exchanged words with these young people, who can be very dangerous, by the way.
Oh.
And he's petrified. He's petrified. And they think it's funny.
The language, the intimidation, it's, and this isn't about race.
No, it's not about color.
No,
it's about behavior.
It's about behavior, right? And with any group, I mean, I've been in places where, man, waiting for the bus, you get people saying, "Kill the white guy." You know, there's a bunch of them. Well, it's, you know, it's not about being white or any other color. It's about, you just said something about a behavior, about doing a behavior on somebody, you know.
Engaging in
right, and it's
behavior
a mob.
To
you get out of
and
there.
You get into a mob mentality.
Yeah.
There have been knifings. The Mall of America last year in November. Macy's. This man stabbed 2 people at Macy's at the mall.
In the name of Allah.
He actually admitted that it was ISIS-inspired. Then we have Morgan.
But isn't he touted as being unstable?
Oh, the excuse constantly is they're either unstable or they're afraid, so they overreact. So everybody that's committing these kinds of atrocities, whether it's at the Mall of America or the mall in St. Cloud, they're always then labeled as unstable. Is the arsonist at St. Catherine's University? Is she unstable? She set 8 fires at St. Kate's. Tried to burn the place down. One of the fires set right near a nursery at St. Catherine's University. So she's unstable? Is that the excuse? Is that the catch-all for all of this behavior?
Well, that's not what she's saying.
No,
She's
also
saying she's a normal Muslim.
No, she says she's also ISIS-inspired as well. She said if she knew how to build a bomb, she would have done that. Her statement, not mine. So what we I'll give you one more example before we move on. I've asked the Minneapolis Police Department to give me an update relative to June 2016.
Okay.
When 30 Somali men traveled cross town from the Cedar Riverside area, presumably, to Lake Calhoun, a very upscale, eclectic neighborhood, and they chased women off the beaches on foot and with their vehicles, driving up onto their lawns, throwing firecrackers and threatening to kidnap and rape them. Is that a hate crime? I think it is a hate crime.
Right.
What was the disposition, do you suppose, relative, and this is the actual police report. Here's the police
Okay.
report. What do you think the disposition was?
I have no idea.
So far, they have not even been charged with, I don't know, a parking ticket,
Okay.
as far as I know.
They're not charged.
No, the only people mentioned in the police report, and Minneapolis PD didn't even want to give me this report way back when, is the only people mentioned in it are the victims, including their names and their phone numbers. The victims are in the police report, none of the perpetrators. I was asked today when I called in to see, they said, well, what are the names of the perpetrators? I said, I don't know. I can give you the case number,
Uh-huh.
and I'd really like an answer back as to what happened. What did Hennepin County Mike Freeman do about the 30 men who attacked 30,
Right.
3 days in a row, attacked these women at Lake Calhoun?
3 days in a row, attacking.
Chasing
Running
them,
after,
going after
chasing.
them, threatening to kidnap and rape them. Is that
So
is
is
that
a hate
is that
crime?
a hate crime?
And they did it in the name of Allah, didn't they?
Yeah. So if the McDonald's guy, who, let's assume for the moment
Is
that he had a weapon, let's
Uh-huh.
assume he did, and that he didn't have a license to carry, a permit to carry. He's backing away from 9 people who are arguing and getting loud and in his face about his exchange with them. He's backing out of the place to get away from them, in my opinion. I watched the video. So, according to Jaylani Hussein, Minnesota Care Director, and I could cite incident after incident, this, according to Jaylani Hussein with McDonald's and Eden Prairie, is a hate crime. This, according to Jaylani Hussein, with the 30 men who attacked those women 3 days in a row, is not a hate crime. He had nothing to say about this. Or the Mall of America, the fellow that stabbed those people at Mall of America. Or the arsonist. That's not a hate crime, according to Jaylani Hussein.
no.
No. And see, my argument is very clear. Here's a good one. Minnesota had 13 church burnings since 2012, burned to the ground, Christian churches. Is that a hate crime? How about Justine Damon?
Depend on how they got burnt down.
No kidding. They still can't solve the problem. They can't solve the mystery of who did these things, right? But they're not looking very hard either. See, Morgan Evenson, age 26, last December, a year ago, was stabbed 14 times in the uptown area of Minneapolis. 14 times. She gave a artist rendition of who the perpetrator was, a Somali man. She was rescued by neighbors who heard the struggle and came out and saved her life. She's since, once her wounds healed, she left Minnesota permanently. Is that a hate crime? No. According to Minneapolis PD, that was just a botched robbery.
Botched robbery, even though he did it in the name of
14 times.
Allah. Right.
14 times.
Well,
So-
why do you think it's not why Jaylani Hussein, why is he not calling these events hate crimes?
Because you can't tell the truth. See,
Okay.
that's what's missing in all of this, is equal treatment under the law, equal treatment by law enforcement as well. That we need to get to a place in Minnesota where we start telling one another the truth and demanding the truth. If one thing is a hate crime, then another thing is a hate crime.
That's that is the very same thing.
Exactly. And you can't complain about bacon on the mosque steps in Rochester, Mr. Hussein, and call that a hate crime and demand an investigation. When all of these other awful things are done to people. You know, on the same night that this man stabbed those 2 people at Macy's at the Mall of America, the same night, a ride operator was charged with 5th-degree assault for groping a woman sitting on a ride at what we used to call Camp Snoopy, sitting next to her child by a ride operator. And I don't have to tell you what community the ride operator came from. Is that a hate crime? Is that an assault? I think it is.
Well, but in our standards it would be, but my understanding is that is not a hate crime by the Muslim standard, because these are infidels, these are less desired people. So you can't commit a hate crime against the less desired people.
So do we have value? This is my question.
Well,
I'm not trying to be cute here.
No.
Does Pastor Parsa have value? Do you have value? Do my children and grandchildren have value in the state of Minnesota anymore? Or are we just collateral damage? Do we not matter anymore to Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman?
No.
Law enforcement in Minneapolis and St. Paul or St. Cloud, do we not matter? Justine Damon's father was just interviewed recently in October by Channel 5 News. She was shot to death July 15th of 2017 by former police officer Mohammed Noor, who, by the way, failed 3 times his pre-academy entrance exam, his psychological examination. Gave him a gun and a badge and a license to kill. Now they've upgraded the charge from 3rd-degree murder to 2nd-degree murder with intent to kill. Is that a hate crime too? I would argue that all of this comes from either fear or hate. Fear on the part of the gentleman at McDonald's, because he has not, by their own admission, there are 9 people in that McDonald's
screaming and yelling,
screaming and hollering at him, because they're claiming that, according to them, it's all due to skin tone that he's upset with them. It's not about skin tone. It's about behavior. Look at me. Do you think that my last name is Swenson or Johansson? The answer is no. I'm a mutt. But here's my point. If we do not start telling one another the truth in Minnesota, this place is done.
Right.
It's becoming increasingly more dangerous every day. The reason is law enforcement, Minnesota governance, the courts are not doing their job. They're refusing to do their job. They won't call it what it is.
Do you think they're on pins and needles?
I think they're afraid now.
They're afraid now.
Of course they are.
And if they start treating these behaviors and holding the Somali community or anybody else that's doing things in the name of Muhammad, a lot of these aren't Somalis that are committing the crimes either on some of these things.
Most of them are.
Most of them are in Minnesota, but not all of them.
True.
And I just think, and I'm wondering if you think, they're kind of really on pins and needles saying, we got to figure out a way to deal with this so that we don't upset them enough, but we still keep law and order.
They had better do it pretty quick, because secondary migration, because of the last election cycle, with Mr. Ellison taking over as Attorney General,
right, which is
covering up for all of this, Mr. Walsh becoming the next governor of Minnesota, covering up for all of this, and without law enforcement taking the lead in this situation, this blanket situation throughout Minnesota, with secondary migration coming from other states, turning 2% of the population into 4 or 5% of the population, bedlam will be the result. Chaos. More people will be hurt, injured, or killed. And I haven't even gotten into the disease and pestilence that we have actually imported through legal and illegal immigrants being brought into Minnesota or allowed to come into Minnesota without even screened, without being screened.
Right.
This is a crime against every Minnesotan, regardless of political bent.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter whether you're Republican or Democrat or independent. This is going to impact every man, woman, and child in the state of Minnesota, and shortly, Minnesota will become a wasteland. People will leave with their money, businesses will leave, they are already doing that. $65 billion of personal wealth has left Minnesota just in the last 3.5 years. They're gone, they're never coming back.
Right.
Businesses like Electrolux are gone to South Carolina. Other businesses are just closing up and leaving. So who's going to be left?
And if a business is honest with themselves, okay, this is about telling the truth. And if a business is honest with themselves, they're going to go and realize and go, Keith Ellison's the Attorney General. He's a Muslim.
A convert to Muslim.
A convert to Muslim. He's going to follow Sharia law.
Yes.
If he's a real Muslim. And therefore, where do I fit in this as a business?
And maybe this question is not so facetious. Is the Mall of America now a Sharia space?
Right. Well,
At some point,
and a business is going to go and say, I need to get out of Minnesota. I'll put my headquarters someplace else.
Amazon is currently being assaulted by Minnesota Care as we speak. They're complaining their prayer time isn't being acknowledged, and that they're being worked too hard during Ramadan and when they're fasting.
And this is
all
a
this
key
other
thing.
nonsense.
This is a key thing about the
Get
prayer
another
time,
job.
so people understand this. People need to know that the prayer time is a scheduled time, but you don't have to do it. You can make it up, and you'd be in compliance.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Not only that,
so
quit whining
when they're
about.
telling, put it in the school, disrupt the school time, disrupt the classes, disrupt the workplace. It doesn't have to happen, but because people don't know the belief system of Muslims, they fall for it.
Well, and lots of people complain about the working conditions with Amazon. That they work.
Right, yeah.
Everybody does. Because they work them hard in terms of long shifts and what have you. It doesn't matter. Skin tone has nothing to do with that.
Right.
So-called religion has nothing to do with that. That just is the corporate culture with Amazon. Okay, if you don't like the job, go find another place to work.
Right.
Don't just create some crazy union and start parading up and down and kicking and screaming because you're feeling as though, oh no, you're suggesting you're being treated badly because of your skin tone. That's baloney. It's absolute baloney. What I'm more concerned about is the crime and violence that is being treated so differently. Morgan Evenson stabbed 14 times, no big deal, no big deal. Everybody says, what, the problem? I don't see a problem.
Right.
The two people.
There's just somebody stabbing somebody.
The two people stabbed in Macy's last year. I don't see a problem.
Well,
or these three.
Here's
or
the big difference.
Where's Mike Freeman with regard to these 30?
I think this is important to understand this difference, okay? And people will say, well, it's just another religion, so don't worry about it. These people aren't really following the religion. Well, no, that's a total, let's talk the truth here, okay? There's nowhere, and they'll go and say, see, other people stab people, and stabbing people has nothing to do with your faith. And I'm going, baloney. In Christian faith, if a Christian goes out and stabs somebody, they're in a sense denying Christ.
Yes,
okay,
absolutely.
They are saying, I'm not following the teaching of Christ. A Muslim goes out and stabs somebody, they do it in the name of Allah.
It's almost obligatory, apparently.
Following the teachings of Muhammad. And they get to do that.
Well, what I get a
and
kick out of.
people don't get that.
What I get a kick out of is that they'll look at a situation where that ugliness has occurred, like these 30 people. If you had 30 Presbyterians who went to Lake Calhoun, or better yet, 30 Presbyterians 3 days in a row go to the Cedar Riverside area and they chase Somali women all over the place with their vehicles. They kick and scream, they throw firecrackers at them, and they threaten to kidnap and rape them. Now, let's see. Let me think for one fraction of a second. Would that be deemed a hate crime? Of course it would.
Right.
Would it be a hate crime? Yes, it would. Those Presbyterians need to be taught a lesson.
Right.
And if they bring on the Catholics and the Lutherans, wow, you really need to go after them.
Right.
But it wasn't Catholics and Lutherans. It was people connected to a religion that seemed to get a pass at every turn. And what's interesting to me is that they create the problems and the drama, then they point to the problem, then they point to the people who are complaining about the problem, and then they claim victimhood every day of the week. And Jaylani Hussein, the Minnesota Care director, has had ample time over the years, with enough incident after incident, to step up to the microphone as he seems
and to cry it.
as he needs to stand up and say, you know what? This is wrong. He never stands up to the microphone to condemn any of the behavior of his own people. I have challenged him on that score on a couple of occasions, which he absolutely hates. I've encouraged him to come to this table as an example and discuss these issues openly. Mm-hmm. He refuses to do that. Mm-hmm. He doesn't condemn the behavior of people within his own community. Right. As a result, there's more of that kind of behavior, right. And they think it's absolutely hilarious. Another example is the Dine and Dash group.
Right. It happened at Chipotle recently.
Chipotle, now they're talking about targeting Applebee's, and they go in, and they're so brazen about it that they brag about it on Twitter and Facebook, mm-hmm. about how they go into a place, they'll eat everything that they want to eat, and then they bolt out of the door, and if anybody tries to stop them, it's suggested that they should cold cock that person and run. And they think it's funny.
Right. And I was thinking, boy, how do they do that at Chipotle's? How do they do Dine and Dash? Well, you do your order, you see it getting made in front of you, and then the order's there at the cash register, and you just take it and go.
And run.
Run.
And why is that behavior?
And so at sit-down restaurants, like Applebee's, yep. They eat their food and then they just leave.
And why is that behavior not instantly? That's why I'm going to get an answer from the Minneapolis PD about the Lake Calhoun incidents 3 days in a row. I want an answer. What was the disposition? If Mike Freeman is going to charge the McDonald's guy, who clearly was wrong if he was carrying a weapon, I'm going
to debate that.
No, I'm not
with
talking
you.
about the license. I'm talking about if he was brandishing a weapon.
Okay.
He was wrong. But you know what?
I don't know that he was.
But you know what?
Personally, I don't know that he was.
I don't mean that. But he had 9 people yelling and screaming in his face. I saw the video. And the guy backed out of the door. In my opinion, he was petrified.
Yeah, and he was retreating.
He was retreating, which is, if he took any kind of a conceal and carry class, which that's what you're told, that's how you're trained to behave. Diffuse the situation and get away. I think the man was scared to death, personally. And we have a right to defend ourselves.
I'm going to tell you, I was just at a store today, and there was a Somali guy on the phone. Just, the language was terrible. He was threatening people. And the cash register said, hey, change your conversation. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, But it's just swearing at people and yelling at them and loud conversation.
Tim, I got to tell you.
And then it's, oh, yeah, we're sorry.
What catches my attention is the arrogance attached to this whole crowd of people.
Right.
They do have a mob mentality. If they do get together in a group and they decide you're the target, you have a problem. And because of the predictably unpredictable behavior pattern on the part of this community, whether they think it's funny to beat up on people in the street or shove them off of a bike and run and laugh, and they think all of this is hysterical because they continue to get away with it, or at Valley Fair, 100 people. Can you imagine 100 people, 6 police departments, and they got away with it?
Yeah. Well, a big thing, this happens to me on Facebook. You're racist, Tim. And I go, explain that. How am I racist?
Islamophobe.
So why is what we're talking about today not racist?
Why can't you?
Because we're talking about Somalis to the large extent.
Yes, we are.
But only because
they're here, and
because
of
they're here,
and because
they're
being
being outspoken about their Muslim faith and practicing it.
They're not even being outspoken about their faith, in my opinion.
I think
I think they're just being arrogant about what they perceive they're entitled to get away with.
But that's based on their Muslim faith.
And that may be true.
From
but
what I know,
it's also a cultural attitude that is just disgusting. because they believe that they can do anything they want to the rest of the population of Minnesota, the other 98%, and get away with it. And Jaylani Hussein with CARE proves that at every turn, because they immediately go to the microphones. They have Minnesota mainstream media looking at their boots and sucking all of this stuff. WCCO television, CBS News, claimed that the Valley Fair, the Valley Scare riot that took 6 police departments, state troopers, a police helicopter, an hour and a half to evacuate 15,000 people, my daughter and son-in-law and my grandkids being a part of that crowd, they called that a minor incident.
Unbelievable.
Minor.
Have we ever done anything like that in Minnesota where they've called 6 departments?
No.
It's the most major incident that they've had.
They're afraid to tell the truth, and that's the problem. It doesn't matter what the issue is. If you can't tell the truth about both sides of it, all you're going to do is encourage more of this behavior.
Yeah.
And the next time and I said this to a police lieutenant with Shakopee PD when I was interviewing him after the Valley Scare riot. I said, this is a probe. They're testing you. Last year they did it on a smaller scale. Now this year it's 100 people. Next year it's going to be worse. And sure as shooting, it wasn't more than 2 weeks afterwards. They had another incident there at Valley Fair, and they also had another one, a dust up at Screamtown, where Jaylani Hussein comes running to the microphone again to complain about the owner of Screamtown saying to his employees, we will have a zero tolerance with regard to this stuff this year. We won't put up with it. Oh, they're racist. They're Islamophobic. They're targeting people because of their skin color. That's nonsense. It's behavior.
Baloney. And the major press has fallen for it. They're just falling in line with it and not asking the hard questions.
And I don't know why, because their kids and grandkids are at risk also.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
Well, we got about 10 minutes left, but there's a couple other things I wanted to bring in here that you were telling me. One.
Oh, good. Maybe you can get my blood pressure to go down.
Well, yeah, because it's personal.
Uh-oh.
Well, I mean, you followed up on this story at the Mall of America, and you went and talked to the police department. Well, what happened? Or not the police department, the security.
The security office, yeah.
What happened? What was your experience?
My experience 3 days later, after Pastor Parsa was arrested and detained unlawfully, in my view, was to go there and ask some questions. So I went to the mall. I had my camera equipment and my recorder with me.
You went as press, or did you?
Yeah, I mean, I told them I was doing a story, and what happened was that I went to the Bloomington Police Department on the 3rd floor of the mall, ran into a plainclothes detective, nice guy, and I said, I'm looking for the mall security office. He said, well, take that elevator, go down 3 floors, make a left, and knock on a door. I said, oh, okay. So I did that. And a nice young man coming through the same door, he said, you need a key fob to get in to that hallway. And he lets me in, and he says, there's the door, just go knock on the door, which I did. So I knocked on the door. And these 2 security officers come at me like they got shot up out of a cannon. They open the door. How'd you get down here? This is a secured area. I went, really? Well, I got down here by my feet. I said, that nice young, I explained how the Bloomington PD fellow,
What you just said,
and I said, I just came, he said, we can arrest you for criminal trespass. I went, for knocking on your door? Really? And I see this marquee thing on the wall.
A public space?
Well, I don't know. I guess, I don't know what. I said, I saw no sign that said this is a secured area, like Area 51, you know. So I was kind of smiling and trying to kid around with him a little bit. I said, I just came down here to ask a couple of questions about this gentleman a pastor who was arrested on Saturday. And this lieutenant gets in my face. He said, break out some ID. And so I said, okay. And so he said, I still want to know how you got down here. I said, I already told you that. I said, here's my driver's license. So he's calling somebody for wants and warrants or whatever, thinking I'm some sort of I don't know what.
Well, and just thinking here, where does somebody go if they need mall security?
I don't know. apparently.
Isn't that the place?
Well, and I knocked on the door. That's all I did. That was my total offense for the day. So he's got my driver's license. He said, we can arrest you right now. And I said, you already told me that. This is the third time you've told me that. For what? Criminal trespass. I said, look, that's it. Gentlemen, I need your badge numbers. I need your names. We don't have to give you that. I said, yeah, you kind of do. I said, I want you to call Bloomington PD upstairs and get them down here. Apparently, I need assistance getting out of this place. I said, you know, I came here to ask a question about the arrest of that man. Mm-hmm. I think you've answered the question. Is it possible that someone could be treated this badly by your office? I said, who here on this marquee is in chain of command-wise, who's in charge of the world here? He said, and the lieutenant says, I'm in charge, I'm in command. I said, no, I mean in the overall. Mm-hmm. Well, we'll give you a name and phone number. You can call them all, the office. And so, and I did that several times. Nobody ever called me back. Yes, you can be arrested at the Mall of America for doing nothing, mm-hmm. including just knocking on the door. But I did assure them, you have answered my question that I came down to ask. And that is this kind of treatment possible? The young officer was actually quite nervous when he gave me the slip of paper with his name and the lieutenant's name and badge numbers and the people to call connected with mall security, whoever's in charge of the world over there. It's like some strange Gestapo type of setup there where they believe that they can do anything they want to whomever they choose and get away with it. And somehow they're backed up by the Bloomington Police Department as well. And I don't understand that either. There seems to be this relationship between them that is somewhat of a mystery to me, and I think it needs to stop.
Yeah, now, it's interesting because that's the same type of treatment I got when I was at the mall. I don't go there much, but I was there for some reason. Had to wait around because I think I was early or whatever. Okay. Sat down at a table, not at a table, but in one of their square sitting places, just a flat area. Two people were talking, having a cordial conversation, and it was one that, you know, I knew they wanted somebody else to come in on. So I asked some questions, participated in the conversation. We were joking around, having a real nice time. It was fun. And all of a sudden, that same security guard that I saw on the videos comes over and tells this lady, you gotta leave, you gotta stop your conversation. And I tell the guy, hey, we're having a nice conversation, what's going on? And the guy goes, she's a troublemaker, she's here proselytizing. And I says, wait a second, we were having a good conversation, we're adults, okay? We were having a good conversation all of us wanted to participate in.
I will make you a bet that if you were dressed in the garb of the Middle East and you were having a conversation with someone else dressed in the garb of the Middle East,
they would have left you alone.
They would have left you alone. The reason is there's special treatment for special people now in Minnesota, and you and me, we're not special.
Yeah.
We're just, I don't know, what are we?
Yeah.
That's my question. And is it true that the Mall of America has now become a Sharia space? In other words, you can behave anywhere you choose if you are
Sharia and anti-Christian. And I asked this guy, I says, hey, we can talk about Christianity if we want. We're adults, you know? And he goes, look, I'm a Christian too. And I said, no, you're not. You can't be a Christian and tell people who are having a mutual agreeable conversation that are enjoying their company to be quiet and get out of the mall, you know? And he was threatening, and I said, you got nothing here.
Pastor,
you know? I was just unbelievable to me.
When Pastor Parsa was arrested, the local pastor and his 14-year-old son were escorted out of the building to the parking ramp and told to get in their vehicle and get off the property. They had no idea where Pastor Parsa was from 7:30 in the evening until 1:30 in the morning.
Wow.
And this man, again, chained to
And-
chain, handcuffed to a steel chair bolted to a floor.
And if the police had him, he would have been out right away.
He asked for Bloomington PD
Except
to be called.
if you're Michelle McDonald, but
Well, but he asked for assistance and he was provided none. And the other pastor had no idea where he was until that phone call was made from the Bloomington Police Department after he had
Okay.
been booked.
Well, another thing happened, and we only got 2 minutes left,
Okay.
less than that. Pastor Hadian
Yes,
was in town,
yes.
and some Somalis came to his presentation.
In St. Cloud last Friday
Okay,
night.
last Friday night.
At the
And what
Baptist,
happened
Granite
there?
City Baptist Church. The
Okay.
presentation was outstanding. I videotaped it and audio taped it.
Uh-huh.
About an hour and a half worth, plus prayer before. And a woman by the name of Natalie Ringsmuth with Unite Cloud sent out a tweet, call to arms to come and disrupt the presentation, which she acquired 2 young Somali men to come and harass Pastor Hadian in the foyer after the presentation was over and get in his face along with her, and she refused
To leave.
To leave. The pastor of the church,
Because
Pastor
she was
Campbell,
loud, obnoxious,
absolutely, and she was trying
scaring
to
people.
Oh yeah, and trying to pretend as though he was trying to touch her in some way. This is a setup. This kind of nonsense has got to stop. And these 2 gentlemen, young men, were clearly there to agitate and to create an incident.
And they didn't
we had
want
wit-
answers to the questions.
No, of course
they
not.
weren't there interested in debating
No.
or,
Or even
curious
having-
about
or
what
even having a
Pastor
conversation.
Hadian had to say.
No,
Who was a former Muslim that converted to Christianity.
Correct.
Ran for state governor in Washington State.
I did not know that.
Yes, my mom loves him.
I did. Great guy, great speaker, and all of his data, all the information he provides is empirical data. This is not information he pulls out of the air. He's very, very good at what he does. I filmed the whole thing, so I'm providing witness to the fact that this didn't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is
Wow.
just a setup.
So a double standard there. We're out of time.
I'm sorry. Always nice being with you, Tim.
Hey, thanks, Bob, for coming on
You're welcome.
again. Appreciate it. Well, folks, remember, if you don't stand up for other people's liberties, who's going to stand up for yours? And good men don't do nothing. Have a great week. God bless. We'll see you next week.
The days go